Hey everybody, Plushie here, and today we've got an exciting hot take to make that is technically 2 years late. Of course, I'm talking about Kukulkan. Now this video is mainly going to be aimed at NA audiences just because Lostbelt 7 is upcoming and she's one of the most hyped up servants ever. But also, right now she is on raid up for a couple more days on JP, so if you are considering rolling for more copies of her, I hope this video helps a little bit. I will be considering a Pen 5 when talking about her performance and farming damage because a Pen 5 is only implemented this year on JP, and it basically reduces your cooldown automatically by an extra turn for every first activation of the skill. But I will also remember to include non-Pen 5 damages in the farming section so that players in NA have an immediate idea of how much damage she will do right out the box instead of having to wait 2 years for this superior upgraded version. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into today's hot take video on Kukulkan, my greatest nemesis. So taking a look at her base stats, we are already starting strong with a decently high attack stat. This is higher than some SSR Avengers even, which is very helpful for a servant in the Foreigner class who is usually going to be hitting neutral instead of counter class. She also has really decent base gain at a 0.78% per hit on a 3-hit arts card, 4-hit quick card, and 5-hit extra attack. This is usually how Lysengo balance out base gains for Buster MP servants with triple Buster decks because they feel like you don't have a lot of cards that can generate MP at all, so we're going to make the little ones count. However, because of how the game is played mainly these days, having triple Buster gives you an immense amount of advantage because your arts cards, you don't want to pick them necessarily all the time, but when you do pick them, they count in terms of generating your MP, and usually, you're just going to be clicking your very powerful crit damage boosted Buster cards. So this is a really good deck for her as well. Highly offensive, giving her both really good single target damage from the cards as well as, her MP being very powerful, which we'll get into in a bit. Interestingly, despite being a foreigner, she does not have the existence outside the domain trait, which means that she doesn't get the 100% extra crit up when you use her with Van Gogh's MP. However, as you'll see later when taking a look at her skill set and passives, it more than makes up for it. So before we get into her actual skill set, I have to briefly tell you how her skills are designed. So each one of her skills have a more tame base form, but you can also spend 10 stars for each of them to upgrade them into a more powerful upgraded form. Because Kukulkan has so many ways to generate stars that most people are just going to click the upgraded version of the skills every single time. So whenever I rate a skill, I will be rating them based on the assumption that you are upgrading these skills. Kukulkan's first skill is a party-wide 20% attack up charisma effect, as well as a party-wide 30% critical chance resistance for 3 turns. And if you spend 10 extra stars, she also gives herself an additional 30% attack up for 3 turns, all only on a 5-turn cooldown. So the skill mainly is just treated as a 50% self-attack up for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown, which is insane. Most of them have like 30% on a 6-turn cooldown, so this is quite nice for just her own damage purposes. The party-wide 20% attack up effect is quite decent as a bonus. You can fit her in a multi-core setup even though she's usually the main attacker. This can help your sub-attackers damage quite a bit. And the critical chance resistance by 30% effect is surprisingly effective at blocking off enemy crits because most enemies have a base crit rate of 20% or lower. So unless they have their own critical rate boosting effects, this is going to not allow them to crit your entire party for 3 turns at all. Kukulkan's second skill is a targetable 50 MP battery, and if you spend 10 more stars, it also gives that target a 2x 3-turn evade as well as a 3-turn sure hit effect on a 6-turn cooldown. So usually you're going to be using this on herself because she is going to be probably the strongest DPS in your party, so you want her to spam her MP more than anyone else, but this can be useful if you want to use it on a supportive MP. It also grants the target even more protection with the 2x 3-turn evade, which is usually going to be used on herself again, and it's a really good self-defensive effect. Can allow her to tank MPs or just take less hits in general. and it also gives her short hit for 3 turns, which, I mean, it's pretty nice as a utility tool. I have not used Kukulkan as a support to give someone else short hit, but technically it can work, and you can combine this skill with her first skill's 20% party-wide attack up. So she can be kind of a support, even though once again, usually you won't be using her as a support because she's a better DPS, but I've definitely had multi-core setups where I need the 50 battery for another DPS instead of herself, so having this flexibility of a targetable battery is really nice for Kukulkan. And another thing in farming, even though usually you won't run out of stars, if you are low on stars, you absolutely do not have to upgrade the skill. This has no damage boost effects tied to it. You just want the 50 battery, it's a 50 battery. So again, a very good skill, and also quite flexible with its targeting. Kukulkan's third skill is a 1-turn self-invul, as well as a 3-turn self 30% buster up, 3-turn 50% crit up, and if you spend 10 more stars, it's also a 3-turn 30% MP damage up, and it only has a 6-turn cooldown. So I feel like we're starting to see the problem here. Her total amount of self-damage buffs is 50% attack up for 3 turns, 50% crit up for 3 turns, 30% buster up for 3 turns, and 30% MP damage up for 3 turns. This is like sometimes even more than 2 servants worth of self-damage buffs rolled into 1 unit. And especially considering she's Buster, she can double cast these skills very easily with 2 Koyan Skya of Lights and the help of Append 5. This is also why her Buster looping damage is so insanely broken, especially after the introduction of Append 5, which makes this skill recastable as fast as turn 2. This skill also has a 1-turn invul effect, and it's a great form of self-defense that can help her block MPs, of course. And a little detail, she has a passive that transforms all invul effect on herself into solemn defense. So this is a bit deceptive because this is not a 1-turn invul, this is a 1-turn solemn defense effect, which of course allows her to even ignore invul pierce on the enemies. So it's wonderful as a defensive skill. This also combos very nicely with her second skill's 2x 3-turn evade, because you can activate both of these skills on the same turn. They even have the same cooldown, and the 2x 3-turn evade would not be used up, while the invul is up. So this kind of, combination of different types of hard defense makes her a really good survival servant, or even a very good solo servant. She has Civilization Creation, which boosts the entire party's debuff success rate by 8%, which doesn't really do much. She doesn't have a lot of debuffs in her kit. Actually, she only has 1, which is the skill seal on her MP, and none of the Buster supports rely heavily on debuffs either, unlike some of the quick supports like Scotty or Khazra Drop, so this is kind of a useless passive on her, unfortunately. But she also has this other secret passive that turns all invul effects into solemn defense that is on her, which of course, I mentioned earlier when talking about her third skill, but this passive also generates 10 stars at the end of every turn. Yes, MLB 2030 as a passive. That of course also helps, get her skills upgraded, because she needs to spend quite a bit of stars if she wants to upgrade all of her skills. And finally, she also charges 3% MP at the end of each turn passively, which doesn't help her in Buster looping, but can be a little bit of a help in challenge quest content. One interesting interaction with this passive is that if you use Constantine after his buff, his MP is able to provide a stackable invul, and when that invul touches Kukulkan, it will turn into a stackable solemn defense. So maybe you can combo it with Castoria, for example. It's just a fun little tidbit. And finally, Kukulkan has an AoE 5-hit Buster MP that gives herself a 1-turn 50% power mod against Threat to Humanity enemies, which means that this doesn't just buff the MP, but also buffs the 2 following face cards on the same turn. This is actually quite a relevant anti-trait despite it being extremely rare, because most foreigner servants have this trait, and Kukulkan as a foreigner deals double damage to other foreigners. This makes her one of the best foreigner counters in the entire game, and on top of that, of course, Oberon as a pretender who's completely counterclassed by foreigners also is Threat to Humanity. So for example, the currently ongoing Super Recollection Oberon quest, Kukulkan has quite the easy time against him as well. The MP also skill seals enemies, which is of course, in my opinion, generally a positive effect, because a lot of modern servants especially have very crazy active skills, and I would rather just take an extra hit than them using one of their skills. And of course, Kukulkan can also kind of protect the party from enemy crits with her first skill's 30% critical chance resist up. The MP also makes 30 stars, which is quite overkill in my opinion, because if you combine this with her passive that makes 10 stars every turn, whenever she MPs, she makes 40 stars, passively. And the MP itself is an AoE buster MP, so it will naturally generate even more stars. So essentially, whenever she MPs, she ends up with 50 stars on the next turn, which is, guaranteed full crits for the entire hand, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. I understand that they really want to make sure she always have enough stars to upgrade all of her skills, but it's not like she's using all of her skills every single turn continuously. So without her using her skills, this is essentially an AoE buster MP that makes more stars than AoE quick MPs sometimes even, which is really dumb in my opinion, but hey, that's how they want to balance her, so what can we do about it? And finally, the overcharge of the MP is anti-earth, from 150% all the way up to 200%. This is very common, like it's a little bit over bloated at this point in the game. We have characters like Summer Ibuki, Koyan Dark, Ereshkigal, and even more that has anti-earth on their MP. But you gotta admit, it's a really good anti-trait because it not just covers technically 1/3 of all servants, but also a lot of non-servant enemies. So it's actually not hard for her to hit anti-trait when you're doing buster farming with her. And of course, it scales with overcharge, so it is, really useful if you want to really bolster her damage and use other MPs before it, or characters like Himiko to even boost it further. So overall, her MP is just super solid. Like, it dumps a bunch of stars, it has 2 anti-traits, and the skill seal is just a really nice bonus. In terms of farming, Kukulkan is undoubtedly one of the best AoE buster loopers in the entire game. And since she's beating 95% of all AoE busters in the entire game, we're not even going to compare her to other 50 MP chargers or 30 MP chargers. We're going straight to the top and pitting her against Arjuna Alter, who is the current ceiling of all buster looping damage. Of course, he has a lot of advantages because he has universal anti-trait, assuming he lands his debuff on his MP, and also he's a berserker, which we always assume he does 1.5 times super effective damage. So as you can see here, when we're looking at Kukulkan without traits damage, yes, it does lose to Arjuna Alter pretty obviously, especially on wave 1 and wave 2. She's doing only about 65% of Arjuna Alter's damage. However, because of a sheer amount of self buffs, on wave 3, she's actually able to pull very close to Arjuna Alter, basically on the same level, doing over 90% of Arjuna Alter's damage. But of course, we can go even further with this. Kukulkan this year received one of the greatest buffs that she ever received, which is of course the addition of Append 5. Append 5 allows 6-turn cooldown steroids to be casted as soon as turn 2 instead of turn 3 for buster looping comps. And Arjuna Alter unfortunately does not benefit from this append at all because his only damaging steroid is on his skill 1, which is already 5 turns cooldown, so he could already double cast it on turn 2 anyways. And as you can see here, Kukulkan's wave 2 damage after the append 5 addition is a lot better than what it used to be. It's still not as good as Arjuna Alter, but now it's doing about 85 to 90% of Arjuna Alter's damage. So it is really impressive once again for a character such as Kukulkan. But then of course, we can also look at anti-trait damage. And when we pull up anti-trait damage without anti-class, then Kukulkan is basically neck and neck compared to Arjuna Alter on wave 1 and already beating out Arjuna Alter starting wave 2. Before the append 5, basically the same. After the append 5, straight up beating Arjuna Alter on wave 2. And of course, wave 3 damage is the same, before or after append 5 for Kukulkan, so it naturally also beats Arjuna Alter. Of course, Kukulkan can also outdamage Arjuna Alter by simply hitting counterclass. So whenever she's hitting berserkers, pretenders, and other foreigners, her damage is also going to be way higher than Arjuna Alter. I mean, foreigners should be out of the question because Arjuna Alter only deals half damage to them, and we have seen 2 90++s with foreigners in the future in JP, so it's not even that unrealistic to consider these extra classes showing up in farming nodes. And of course, Kukulkan can hit both counterclass and anti-earth, and by that time her damage would be absolutely insane and through the roof, and I don't think many servant can really catch up to that, other than some very niche cases I'll bring up briefly later. Kukulkan, under super niche situations, can also hit threat to humanity. So I'm not including any of these calculations here just because, you know, that's kind of a when stars align situation, but just know that her damage ceiling is very high. So overall, when compared to Arjuna Alter, yes, normally when without any trait and counterclass, Kukulkan is going to be losing to Arjuna Alter across all 3 different waves, even after the Append 5 fix. However, you know, other than wave 1, her wave 2 and wave 3 damage is like 85 to 90% of Arjuna Alter's damage. So basically neck and neck and very close. And under the circumstances where she's hitting Earth attribute enemies, Berserkers, Pretenders, and Foreigners, she's going to be outdamaging Arjuna Alter as well, which is not that hard to hit one of these 4 different situations. Because of all these reasons, I do believe Kukulkan is on par with Arjuna Alter as the top Buster Looper in the game, but even if you disagree, at the very least she is top 3 Buster Loopers in the entire game. Of course, there's an additional group of Buster Loopers that has the ability to actually run MLB Black Grail instead of cranking, which is the free 50 MP starting charge CE we use for Kukulkan's damage calculation, and because of the sheer quality difference between these 2 CEs, their damage is very competitive even when pitted against a monster such as Kukulkan. For example, Melusine has always been a staple Buster Looper, especially if you have an MLB Black Grail, and as you can see here with her damage, her wave 1 and wave 3 damage is beating out Kukulkan traitless, but her wave 2 damage, despite with the help of an MLB Black Grail, still loses to Kukulkan, especially after Kukulkan gets her Append 5. And for many Buster looping comps, the most troubling wave to clear in terms of damage is actually wave 2, because it is the most common wave where the game implements a giant singular high HP target. So despite Melusine beating out Kukulkan in more waves out of 3, in reality I'd say Kukulkan with cranking is actually a better Buster Looper than Melusine with MLB Black Grail, which is of course very impressive. We also have to briefly take a look at the other 2 servants that has the ability to run MLB Black Grail after the implementation of Append 5, Tonalico and Arcawade. And as you can see here, despite with the massive crutch that is an MLB Black Grail, their damage just matches or is even lower than Kukulkan with cranking. So once again, they don't really compete with her in terms of Buster looping. There's one small thing to note though, because their anti-traits scales with MP level instead of overcharge, if you have them at MP 3 or above, when they are against their respective anti-traits, which is anti-evil for Tonalico, anti-chaotic for Arcawade, they do more damage when compared to Kukulkan when she's anti-earth. All of this calculations regarding Black Grail loopers is going to be thrown out of the window as long as the event has a 50 MP starting charge CE that has damage bonus, which has been a more and more common practice, especially this year in JP. I'm pretty sure, except for like one event, every single event has a damage bonus CE with a 50 starting charge. And when that is the case, Kukulkan is just going to blow all of these Black Grail loopers out of the water in terms of raw damage. But of course, how can we forget about Kukulkan's actual greatest rival, the only other AoE Buster Foreigner that also has an anti-earth MP? I'm of course talking about Koyan Dark, and here is her looping numbers compared to Kukulkan. Yeah, what more can I say about this? So Kukulkan also of course has the ability to be run in a multi-core team. As I mentioned when talking about her skill set, the targetable 50% MP battery is surprisingly useful in certain situations, and the party-wide 20% attack up is a really nice bonus. However, one thing you do have to be careful of is when you're team building, you're no longer guaranteed a 20 star bomb to upgrade her skill 1 and skill 3 with. But honestly, in most cases, if you do run into a super high HP target with Kukulkan, because she has 3 Buster cards, what most people do is you still run just a single core Buster looping comp, and you just make up for the damage with her Buster crits. They hit so hard. There's even a node during next year's White Day where the first enemy is a 600,000 HP Berserker or something, and what people actually did was just they fully critted wave 1. So I will say in most cases, you should probably just run single core looping comps with Kukulkan. In terms of challenge quest performance, as an AoE buster unit, you can't really get much better than someone like Kukulkan. She essentially has everything you would ever want in a buster DPS and more. First and foremost, she has very powerful self-damage buffs that both contributes to very powerful MP damage as well as very powerful crit damage. Her MP also has a very wide coveraging anti-trait in anti-earth, so she has a lot of opportunity to do even more damage with her MP, and the anti-threat to humanity is a really nice bonus against certain story bosses. She also of course has very powerful crit damage that is supported by her triple buster deck, so she never runs out of buster cards to crit with, and also her insane amount of star generation from both her MP and her passive. So even after the first few turns after you've run out of star bomb skills and CEs, you can still make very consistent critical damage as long as you're using her MP. Kukulkan also of course has really good survival when combining her skill 2 with her skill 3, and her passive even allows her to bypass enemies' Info Pierce. So you can't really fault anything on this character, like it's kind of a flawless character. She doesn't really have a super unique gimmick that makes her really broken and does something that no other people can do, but the way Kukulkan leverages her advantage is just with the sheer numbers she has. She has just so many effects in each one of her skills, and it covers every single aspect of battle, so mathematically she is just going to be superior than basically every other buster AoE servant. Obviously, you can argue stuff such as Arjuna Alter being more offensive than Kukulkan because of his Berserker class, as well as his Universal Anti-Trait applying to one of his skills, so it also counts his cards for multiple turns on end. However, on the other hand, he doesn't really have nearly as much survival as Kukulkan because he's a frail berserker with only a gut skill, and also he can't really feed himself a lot of stars for him to have sustainable crits, unlike Kukulkan. On the other hand, you can also argue characters like Morgan has better survival than Kukulkan because she has really good combos with Castoria and can technically run the Immortal team and whatnot, but then she doesn't really have the explosive offensibility when compared to Kukulkan in a standard double Koyanskaya of Light team. So it's not like Kukulkan does absolutely everything the best and it validates every other AoE buster in the game. However, on an overall scale, she is the best AoE buster in my personal opinion, and I do feel like for a lot of people, this kind of character is what they're looking for, especially as like a Grail target or a high MP level target. She is a great servant to invest a lot of resources in and just carry you through majority of the content in the game. Back in the day, I would say quests such as Super Recollection quests or Exhibition quests kind of hold back Kukulkan a little bit because a lot of her explosive offensive power comes from the fact that she can easily double cast her already super powerful skills when combo with double Koyanskaya of Light, and also she really wants a bunch of stars on the first turn in order for her to upgrade all of her skills and still have leftovers to crit with. However, after the introduction of Append 5, her cooldown got even shorter to the point that in a challenge quest context, I think you can easily run something like a single Koyan Light plus another cooldown reducing support, such as Summer Ibuki, and still kind of do the same thing that she wants to do. So once again, Append 5 very much fixes a lot of her issues in my personal opinion. And yes, I keep bringing up Koyan Light, but personally, I don't really think she needs Koyan Light to be like decent and good. It's just that Koyan Light can fully unlock the absolutely insane offensive power she has. And with that, I also want to slightly segue into the fact that she's a very good solo servant because of all the things I just mentioned, and specifically in a solo, you are guaranteed a triple buster hand every single turn, so you can just spam triple buster with her even when she's not using her MP, and because of her passive that gives her 10 stars at the end of each turn, you can kind of have really good crit RNG even if you're just solo spamming her triple buster. That cannot be said for most other triple buster spamming solo units such as Herc or Ku Alters. Another great thing is that her Mighty Chains with her MP is actually really good at spamming, and her MP of course makes 30 stars combined with her passive, basically guaranteed crits on the following turn, so she can just keep on spamming Mighty Chains and then using her MP as well. One thing about solos is that you don't really need to live forever. All you have to do is live long enough in order to kill the enemy, and Kukulkan can easily do that with a very decent amount of survival provided by her skill 2 and skill 3, and a very high damage output as a solo servant, so she can very much take advantage and make the most out of the turns that she bought with those survival skills. Once again, super self-sufficient and powerful servant. In conclusion, Kukulkan, in my opinion, is the best overall Buster servant in the game. Yes, there are certain aspects that she cannot beat certain units in, but in terms of overall performance, no other servant really comes close to the raw amounts of value she can provide. As an AoE Buster Looper, she fits perfectly into the double Koyan Light plug Oberon system without the help of an MLB Black Grill, and arguably is the best alongside Arjuna Alter, or at the very least top 3 AoE Buster Loopers in the entire game. And in terms of challenge quests, I feel like I've said more than enough that she basically covers all situations and is going to be a great asset to your team no matter what team you are building, despite double Koyan Light being once again the standard best comp. Kukulkan is a great investment target for Grails and MP levels because she is built to be a one-fit-all solution that can take care of 99% of the entire game's content. So if you're looking for a servant that can do something unique, something gimmicky that no other unit can do, then maybe Kukulkan is not the best choice. But if you're just looking for raw power level, Kukulkan is your servant. Look no further. She definitely stood the test of time even 2 years into the future now in JP, and honestly got even stronger after this year's Append 5 implementation, so you don't have to worry about her falling out of favor anytime soon. As a special end to this video, I got one of my great friends, XY Sunder, who you might know for constantly putting me and Koyan Dark in our places in terms of min-turn content, give his personal take on Kukulkan. You know, he does have more experience with the character, and I will leave his summary here on screen, and please do check it out just to get sort of a second perspective on this character. He really is one of the most experienced Kuku users ever. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, it's a long one and it's been a super long wait as well. Good luck on rolling for Kukulkan. I'll see you guys in the next one.